Our meeting to order. Good. Wait for the clerk to be.
Sorry.
That's all right. You're a vital part of the operation, so we gotta wait. We'll wait for you. All right. So this is the December 9th, 2019 meeting of the Addison Central School District Board here at Shoreham Elementary School. Let's begin our meeting as we always do with a round of introductions of board members. Mary, if you'd begin for us.
Mary Gill. Mary Colleen. Betty Cafonte. Jory Jacobite. Lorraine Morse.
Peter Conlon.
Peter Burrows, Superintendent.
Jen Uceda.
James Chip Malcolm.
Victoria Jitty. Davina Daybright. Suzanne Buck.
All right, thank you, everybody. We decided we couldn't public comment or the presentation first. Yeah. All right. So we tonight, despite the lack of students in the audience, as we often have at these meetings, we do have a presentation from the folks in Shoreham, which the principal will be preparing for us. But before we get to that, this is the time in our board meeting where we welcome public comment. It's an opportunity for us to listen, and I'd just like to open the floor up to anybody if there is some public comment. Yes, if you just tell us who you are and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Tanya Secretary from Shoreham. And I want to thank all of you for the time and effort you've been being on the board. It's a thankless job, I'm sure, and we really appreciate all that you've been into it. My comment is about the sixth grade, the decision to move sixth grade. I had attended the community meetings when they were gathering public input. And then when the announcement was made that that conversation was going to be tabled, we were going to work on a long-term plan before that decision was made. And then over the summer, we learned that that decision's been made without any further public input. So I think myself and other members of the community that I've talked to feel really blindsided by that decision because there were all these public meetings, and then the decision was made to hold off on that decision. And I also just want to take this opportunity to let people know or remind people that Shoreham and many of the other smaller elementary schools are growing in size. I think Shoreham's gone up about 40% over the past 5 years. When you look at the numbers for the other small schools, those are also growing. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
I'm Joanna Doria. I'm from Ripton. I sent you guys all an email and with an attachment, and so I won't read what I sent you, but I'll sort of summarize it. The first thing I wanted to say is that I understand you're going to talk about the tax commissioner's letter tonight, and I wanted to draw your attention to two things. One, it's mentioned twice that an increase in education spending is welcome if it shows added value and equity for students. We may have different ideas of what equity actually looks like in our district, and I think that dynamic is healthy, but I hope that we can agree on the task at hand to work together to examine the strengths of our district, consider what we can feasibly offer to better the education of our kids, and to question if we are serving all of our students in a way that supports their ability to thrive. Our communities have acknowledged that there's a balance between creating a responsible budget and understanding that education is important and should be invested in. And the second thing I wanted to draw your attention to was the White River Unified School District. They're on a spending freeze right now, but beyond that, they merged last year and hasn't shown any savings. I also attached a study done by Penn State, professors at Penn State, that sort of outline what can be done at a bigger level to address spending. And I just wanted to share that with you. I found it interesting. Granted, the solutions in this study are larger than our district, but I personally heard Secretary French's praise for our district and how we are the vanguard in the state. And I think this board holds a lot of responsibility, and I'm confident that there's a creative solution that we can all run.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Barb Wilson. I live in Shoreham. And it's more of a question for me. How much is the budget is due to health care costs? As you may know, I'm very much an advocate for changing health care reform. And my suspicion is a lot of what we struggle with is because of the crazy healthcare that we're all struggling with. So I'd really be interested to see, what percentage is, and I'd really encourage that collectively that we advocate for universal healthcare, because that might save us lots of money and give everyone equal healthcare.
Can't answer the question, but I'll take the opportunity to just say that at our next meeting, which will be on the 18th, we're going to get our first draft of the budget, and we should have better information then. Yes?
I'm Brian Mason. I'm from Weybridge. First of all, thank you all for the work you put in. Obviously, it's really important. Everyone, myself and many community members realize how important that is, and just appreciate the time and effort that you put in. I just wanted to say, I made a couple comments in another board meeting, and thank you also for the community discussion that we had in Weybridge looking back. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate just one kind of cautionary note that I've been thinking about, and then I've heard a lot of other people also talk about, and also, sorry, I missed your name, but kind of piggybacking on what Tanya said as well with the 6th grade decision, and it's really about process, stepping back from kind of what the final outcome is, the cautionary note is that it's so important for everyone to feel that the process is open and inclusive and is taking into consideration multiple viewpoints, and that there's no predetermined outcome. It's challenging with the board, especially being so new after consolidation. Consolidation itself was relatively challenging, I would guess, and it left some different tastes in people's mouths, I would say. The 6th grade decision in particular did feel to myself and many people to be out of the blue, something that I hadn't even realized was coming back up or being discussed again. I just found out that my daughter was going to be in 6th grade at middle school instead of at our elementary school. And so it's things like those that are not really building that level of trust that is going to be so important to keep this process at least somewhat civil towards the end, especially assuming that in the end some schools do close. We might arrive at that decision in multiple ways, but if people don't feel like there has been a wide range of options looked at and really investigated, and a lot of time spent on alternatives as well, that it can be a really divisive situation. So I just want to throw that cautionary note out there and encourage everyone to do whatever we can to make people not only feel heard, but feel that their input is being taken into consideration and part of the process. So,
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, it's a dark and dreary night, and we appreciate everybody's willingness to come and share their thoughts with us. And we do appreciate them, and we do hear them, and we do listen to them.
Oh, I was just going to say something quickly.
Sure.
For Shoreham, so I spoke about my deep feelings at the last meeting in Weybridge. But I just want to say quickly, there's a suggestion that maybe you put on Front Porch Forum and Facebook and stuff about these meetings, because I think a lot of people had no idea this was happening, as you see. I tried to pay attention, and I didn't find out until last week that it was in Shoreham, so just a suggestion.
All right.
I believe on our website, all the locations and dates for the entire year are
I was trying to, I don't know, I find on my phone,
Okay.
maybe it's kind of confusing. but-
Okay, I'll take a look just
But
to
just
make
some
sure.
reminders are always good for those
Yep.
of us who are more.
Yep.
Boston versus Lansing.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Front Porch Forum.
All right, well, thank you all very much, and since we are here in Shoreham, Mike, I understand you've got a presentation for us.
Yes.
Why don't you give us a full introduction and,
So I'm Mike Lennox, principal here, and we had some of our teachers and students present or create the presentation tonight, so I'm going to be reading what they wrote. So I didn't put this together. It was put together by Ms. Longchamp, our 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Woolham, our 5th and 6th grade teacher, their students, along with Abby Adams, who's our librarian and IB coordinator. And the presentation's mostly focusing on some of their PYP IB projects. So it's nice to be able to show the work that they've been doing. Tomorrow night is our concert at the high school, so that's going to be a late night for our students. And Thursday of last week was the Shakespeare, so there's several late nights happening all at once. Anyone's welcome to join us at the high school. It's a great event where, well, so many people from the community come out to it, we can no longer house it here safely. So 6:30 at the high school. And with that, I will work through their presentation. Okay, so the first work is by Madeline, Keeson, and Madison, and it's about coffee. So the first presentation is from a group of 6th graders as part of their sharing the planet. The central idea is the production and trade of goods and services contributes to the economic interdependence between nations. This presentation is part of the summative assessment of the unit. Students need to demonstrate an understanding of the different steps needed to bring raw resources to a finished consumer product and the impact of that production on our planet and other cultures. Students develop their technological skills by creating Google slide presentations from a template with the support of our library media specialist. So coffee beans are a raw resource that comes from inside the seeds that comes from a coffee plant. Coffee beans grow in a plant called the tropical evergreen shrub. Pulling machines remove paper from the beans that was left over from when they were drying them. Polishing the beans is an option, which is when they take off any of the excess skin. When the beans get sorted by color, also ones with imperfections get pulled out. And they do this with a grater. Yeah. That's how you get to be the superintendent. Then they look at the human labor side of it. Then they look at the transportation. That's harder to read. So the milled beans are loaded onto ships and bags, loaded into shipping containers. It's hard to transport coffee by ocean, but they manage to do it. Then the coffee beans get loaded on a train or a truck. Then they go to distribution. After the hard labor, after it was grounded into little powder, just like dust, you put it in the coffee machine and it makes you coffee. So the following videos are part of Who We Are. It's the 3rd grade, which focus on perspectives, specifically the central idea. Our perspectives affect our actions within communities. And before I start playing their videos, this is always a fun time. This is the 2nd time she's taught the unit, and she has several different community members come in and speak to the students during that time. So every time I turn around, there's a new community member in the hallway. We've even had Peter.
Officer Duplessis's perspective is he brings criminals to jail, and he's principled, and he keeps people safe. Officer Duplessis's perspective is that he's caring by helping people and to save people, and he brings criminals to jail. Officer Duplessis's perspective is to keep people safe. He is caring by helping people to stay safe.
And they were talking about Officer Duplessis, who's a Vermont State Trooper, who lives right down the road from the school and has 2 daughters in the school and a son in the high school. So these presentations were created after community engagement with the state police officer and the captain of our fire department, who both spent an hour talking to our class. The kids planned questions to ask. We recorded information both separately and as a class. Each group had to decide on their own what they were going to present on and had to script, illustrate, and practice their flipped presentation. These projects were 100% student done. They had a few parameters for the points that they needed to cover, but the work in production was entirely student-led. Before students started recording, our library media specialist, Abby Adams, came into the classroom, talked about best practices in video recording, how to center yourself in the frame, and how to use microphones available effectively, and how to support a classmate when you're not the one speaking. 3rd grade also went to Dead Creek this fall. The Dead Creek field trip was at the Dead Creek Wildlife Management Center's bird banding workshop, and it kicked off the 3rd grade unit into inquiry into where we are in place and time. This free workshop was supported by a $150 grant from Fish and Wildlife, which provided the bus transportation. Students had hands-on opportunity to experience how scientists use information to understand the world, one of the lines of inquiry for this unit of study. And this is one of the nice ways where IB is enriching our curriculum. This is a trip we probably would have done 4 years ago, but we may not have had as many thoughtful questions and connected it to the curriculum across 6 weeks. So students wrote reflection pieces about which learner profile traits were present in Brave Irene, and anchor text for who we are in the unit of inquiry. Students used a structure to write about 3 different learner profile traits present in the character Irene. They found supporting evidence in the text to back up the claim. These are just some formal examples of the students integrating the work of IB into units that they would have done. They would have probably read that book before IB, but it's giving them a language to understand it from a deeper frame. Or if they're studying coffee production, it's giving them language and concepts to help understand it in a deeper way and ideally make connections beyond that. So that's a nice thing that I hope this work showed. The other thing that I wanted to talk about tonight that's been a positive growth this year at Shoreham is last year we were one of the schools that piloted a community partnership team. And we've been in the year-long journey of figuring out what that means to be a community partnership team, how it is different than a PTO, what work they do or do not do, and who does the work. And last year I think we went through different phases. And at this phase, it really feels like we're starting to get up off the ground and expand. We have, most of our meetings have anywhere from 10 to 12 parents who come out. We have a few staff members who attend. I'm no longer facilitating the group. It's being led by one of our parents. I think that has been a really positive growth this year. And that's something that I'll be writing more about in my board reports, but that's something special to know that last year I couldn't have shared about, but it's here now. All right, thank you.
Any questions? I just have a quick one. The 6th grade part there with the coffee, what was their unit of inquiry?
So the central idea is the production and trade of goods and services contributes to the economic interdependence between nations.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we have the minutes from 11:25. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Lorraine moves.
Second.
Mary seconds. Any discussion on these? Additions, subtractions, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? We have we have 3 abstentions. Jen, Mary, Colleen, and Jory.
You get a pass this time.
All right, on to the bills. Oh, there weren't any this week, right?
There were no bills last week, and unfortunately no bills this week. We'll catch up.
Excellent. All right, on to the report of the superintendent. We all have the ACSD board report. Are there questions on that? Do you have any, would you like to comment on it?
Well, I can maybe wrap that into the mid-year update, which is ostensibly one and the same.
Well, before you do that, specific to those items that are not an interrelation between the strategic plan update and the board report, any questions? I had one I was just sort of struck by, since we're here, Mike Lennox's report, and just sort of the challenge of staffing. It sounds like there were some unique changes here, but I am curious, since we have reports now of, 2.1 unemployment rate, and we do have positions that need to be filled throughout the year, how that is going, and how that's going particularly here in Shoreham.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's at kind of a fever pitch here right now, in that we have a number of open positions that we haven't been able to fill. We've tried to advertise in as many places as we can, word of mouth, to try to let people know about the openings that we have here. It's not really isolated just to Shoreham. It's something that we're consistently seeing across the district, and this is a statewide issue as well. So I've talked about it with regional superintendents in Addison County, as well as the Champlain Valley group that we're a part of, and more broadly. Some of these support service positions are very challenging to fill. We're competing with many other businesses. Going last year, for example, or was it 2 years ago, Mary, that event was at Basin Harbor?
2 years.
Addison County Business Development Roundtable. The thing we heard loud and clear from businesses there was they're having a hard time finding skilled labor as well. So it's an issue that, unfortunately for us, is increasing. We're trying to think outside the box. It also has significantly impacted substitutes. We've been talking with the association about substitutes for a couple of years. This year we tried to create more of a marketing campaign for substitutes to let people that maybe don't know about what subbing is like, to try to make entry easier. Sometimes, we don't go that extra step to be more inviting, so we're kind of trying to work on taking that extra step, both with that and with these other positions. But we're making a dent here and there, but it's still something that we're facing. And having conversations, being a district now, it makes it a little bit more flexible in terms of staffing. Previously when someone was employed in Shoreham, they were employed for Shoreham School District. Now it's ACSD wide, so that does provide us some flexibility. The counter to that flexibility, however, is that if you're going to move someone from another building, they're also really rooted in that community and in that school, and that school sees the need for that person really intensely as well. So there's no easy solution here, but we are kind of every day talking about it, and Mike has been exceptional in filling every role in the school potentially. Many of them. He's been a cook, he's been a paraprofessional, and does it without complaint at all, and does it wholeheartedly. So we want to give him kudos for that.
Is that what happens?
Yes.
Is that the fail-safe in our schools? When basically, you've got an open position, it's supposed to be, you're sort of almost obligated to have that person available, especially if it's an aide or whatever. Does that tend to be the fallback, is that you sort of grab whatever qualified adult might have the ability to do it, which is often, I assume, the principal?
Yeah, I mean, the principal, in a small school is, takes on every role. So Mike fills in, if there's a counseling need, sometimes he'll fill in that role. He'll fill in a nursing role sometimes, not as a nurse, but, part of that role, like whatever the piece that's missing, Mike will kind of flow and fill some of that in. It's much harder when you have a position which you really need, like a 1.0 position, a paraprofessional that you need there every day. It puts strain on the entire school when Mike is pulled away is in a classroom and someone needs support up front or wherever. It gets to be challenging to juggle all that.
I just wanted to reiterate, I spent, an hour in Shoreham last week on my visits, and
Yeah.
Michael showed me around, and it was so obvious that he was having to spend a lot of time in roles that are taking away from what he has to do normally.
Right.
Never complained, and I don't think the system was breaking down at all. However, I just want to compliment that fill-in capacity, in this case of the principal, but it's a real severe problem because it impacts everything else in the school, from him getting his work as principal to the balance of everything else. So I don't know what the solutions are, but it struck me that day. I mean, the place was great, but on the other side, I said, wow, this is going to be tough when these children have to be cared and monitored and all the rest.
Mary?
Victoria and I also had the opportunity, we've been to a couple of schools doing visits, and substitutes kept coming up by a number of teachers. They said, can you substitute for us? I mean, and we're like,
So the marketing campaign's working.
But I can't, right? So is there some way to kind of create a waiver for those of us who would have time or an interest in subbing? I mean, I've
What do you
been
mean by
asked
a
multiple
waiver?
times and said I can't.
Oh, you mean as a board member?
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
got it.
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, we've had to write the Secretary of Education to get a waiver. We did that once for a board member who was also a coach.
I mean, I don't mean a full-time employment or anything like that.
Right.
I'm just like, if teachers
Yeah.
can't take time off
Yeah.
to do training or because they're ill or whatever, as Mike finds out, he's filling in all these holes. I just wanted to put that
Well,
out there.
if you're interested, let's talk.
Okay, 'cause
We'll let you
I
solve
heard that
that
from a number of
offline.
teachers, and I was
Yeah.
feeling like,
Yeah.
oh.
Watch it, Mary.
I know, I have already,
You may get a call at 5 every morning.
but I know there's an issue with board members being
Yeah, yeah,
in the school. But personally, the visits
Be
were
great,
so wonderful,
yeah.
I would go just
yeah,
to be with the kids.
yeah.
So,
I'm excited that's happening.
yeah.
All right, why don't you
Okay.
take us through a little bit more general?
So this mid-year report is the last mid-year report, or mid-year update rather, of our 5-year strategic plan. And I'm not going to go through all of the detail here. A lot of this we've been updating every month in the board report, so this is kind of a summation of a lot of what we've been sharing monthly. I did want to talk a little bit about the strategic plan itself and our thinking as we move towards the end of the plan and we start thinking about what comes after it. We had conversation over the summer in looking at the kind of the big work of this year, and one path led down create another plan, get a bunch of committees together, get the community engaged, and look at kind of where we are and where we want to go. Given the amount of work that is on the plate already, and looking at the direction that I think we have as a district, it didn't seem like expending all of that time and energy to create this document, which really in some ways may not be as helpful for us right now, given that we have direction and we have an understanding of who we are, but we have a lot of work to do. That thinking about planning and assessment and looking at our key performance indicators, thinking about that slightly differently and more dynamically probably makes more sense for us as an organization as opposed to creating another 5-year solitary document. That thinking about taking it basically to the next step in terms of considering how we assess the work that we're doing, considering the timeline. Right now we're on an academic timeline where we get a lot of assessment data in October, but then we kind of focus on it in May and June. Maybe rethinking both our timeline in terms of when we share out some of the information, and then thinking about how annually we're assessing our progress, the key performance indicators that we've been developing through this plan. Now that we're starting to build systems where we have some longitudinal data where we can look and say, okay, we are moving here, here, and here in these areas. What my thinking is in terms of kind of the next stage is to, at the end of this strategic plan, and really between now and the end of the year, be in conversation to talk about kind of what are some of the key components of more of an annualized process as opposed to a 5-year process, at least right now, as we're in the midst of a lot of the work that the strategic plan helped us to get started. So anyway, that's kind of my thinking. There's a little, if you read through this, the summary kind of wraps up some of what I just mentioned. It's a little bit shorter than what I just shared, but that's my current thinking in terms of how we build from this plan, which I think has been really powerful in both bringing us together as a district and helping us to move forward, and then where we go from here in terms of the next iteration.
Mary.
I read it in detail, and I think what you're saying is really important because there's such good information in your strategic plan, and there's clear guidelines and things that you're doing, but there's no sort of, so where we are, how have we, what's the outcome been over 5 years?
Yeah.
And I think to be able to spend more time defining, we really have made progress, or gee, we haven't done as much as we wanted, how do we evaluate that and change that? Nationally, the news has been out that all the energy that we put into No Child Left Behind and Race to the Top hasn't really done much. So I think we do need to look more strategically, and I think this plan does that, and hope to see the results of all this energy and effort you're putting into it.
Yeah.
And your staff. Yes, I agree with, I think, staying with it and not creating something that you have to work on again.
Yeah. And I think it's a mixture of, we tend to want the quantitative data to say we're absolutely positively 100% moving in the right direction. This work is very qualitative and it's quantitative. And I think that's the issue with No Child Left Behind, and using standardized metrics to say yes, success or failure, which we know it's so much more complex than that. But we need to have a balance of that too. So that's kind of what I was mentioning in terms of thinking about October as a time to look at assessment data when we get it in the spring or summer, and then we can kind of like the old E-report. I don't know if anyone here remembers the E-report.
Absolutely.
The high school E-report?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Good old E-report. So something around that time.
Right.
And the final report, so if you look back to the last year's end of year report, does have some more of that assessment in terms of, this is more of a narrative in the mid-year, and then that final has more of that kind of the key performance indicators and kindergarten readiness. And we definitely hone in on obviously literacy.
But it was clearly stated in your summary that this is qualitative.
Yeah.
And in the spring it's going to be more than quantitative.
Yeah.
So I'd say my take on it is that the strategic plan coincided, not necessarily coincidentally, with unification, with IB, definitely not coincidentally with IB. And so there was a lot in there and a lot all together that even though we're sort of approaching the end of 5 years, we've set this course. We kind of know where we're going. And I would imagine that if we were to do another 5-year strategic plan, it might just say, keep going the direction that we're going without...
Can I have some more of that, please?
Yeah. And so I guess I can understand why, rather than reinventing the wheel, you'd rather prefer to look at it as more of a annual sort of achievements. Since we kind of got this, we're a big ship and we're steered in a direction. I don't know if that makes sense. That's my take on it. Any other thoughts or comments on this? Yes, Chip?
But I think somehow, I would, having read it over too, not in its detail, maybe Mary might have read it, but I was struck by the fact that somehow we have to have a way you continue this along, because there's things we're going to want to assess as we go through. I mean, there's changes, assuming the 6th grade does move, assuming that IB gets all completed and we then have everybody moving through that process at the same time. We want to be able to assess that. And I think in a greater, more detailed way than, like Michael said, this is how it happens and how we're relating these things. We need to try to assess it as to, is it really happening? Does it? So, maybe it's not in the case of a plan more than a set sort of time frame on assessments of some of these things that we wanted to look at. And sometimes it's qualitative, it's not necessarily quantitative assessment. But so I don't know how you
Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
structure this so that there is a continuum where you just don't take this, goes on the shelf, and you say, yeah, we did that once, and now I don't know how you do it.
We want evidence that it's working.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
Right, you take the core pieces and build on
Yeah,
it.
you build on it.
Mary?
And I think it's going to be important, especially given the conversations that we're having with regards to the facility, strategic plan, et cetera, that we establish and more importantly, communicate what some of those common yardsticks are going to be for measurement. Because especially in education research, we can find gads of studies on either side of any debate. That's just the way it has been in education research. It's very hard to get good education research from a quantitative perspective that conforms to all the requirements of research, because at the end of the day, the kids who are they're kids, they're being studied. Like, you don't get to do the same things you get to do in medical research. And so
you have a control.
You don't have you can't control it as much. And so that's why we have seen such fluctuation, I think, in the yardsticks that we apply to the teaching and learning process. So I would suggest as we move forward, not only with the strategic plan, but with the facility strategic plan combined, we really think about communicating what those common yardsticks are going to be. And that will help us all as we see different pieces of research come in and use this research for this argument and this research for this argument. We all have to be on the same page of that, or else I think it's going to be difficult to move forward.
I think, Chip, what you were saying, and I'm going to just echo it here and tell me if I'm wrong, the thing that's been good about having this 5-year strategic plan is it's given us a tool to fall back on a regular basis, checking in, how are we doing, and we'd like to continue that as we go forward, which I'm sure is not we just, as you say, sort of say, okay, in October we're going to get these results, and in May we'll,
Well, and I think it can expand too. I mean, I think we're in a different place now than when we did this work 5 years ago. And so thinking about assessment and communicating that to the community, I think it's probably broader than when we started out 5 years ago. It's changed, it's adapted. So we need to change and adapt too, and be clear about that, I think. So I do see it as something that's formalized. And I think that's the key, is that it's a formalized thing that we all know, and we all know, like everybody knows.
And I think it's nice to spend your attention on that and your energies on that, rather than
the process of coming up with another 5-year plan. I feel like your staff and the community have had a lot going on the past few years, and I think to add a 6-month committee process to that might just...
I don't use the word committee anymore.
Working group?
Yeah, that might just add
Or
a
task force.
stressor that's not necessary if you have some frameworks.
No longer in the lingo, right? Yeah.
Yeah, nobody needs another committee.
I use the term pop-up.
Pop-up meeting.
All right, any further questions or comments before we move on? All right, so how about an update on our process for selecting student representatives to the board and timing?
Sure. So I've been working with Bill. Bill has been reached out to the student body and is currently accepting applications. He is also, part of our process, we talked about a 2-pronged process. One was opening it to everybody, but also we know that if we just open it to everybody, we may have just the same types of students applying for these kinds of opportunities. So targeted conversations are also important before selecting the student representative. So he is also thinking about the student body and having individual conversations with students who we think could be a good fit as well, to encourage them to apply to be on the board. So we're working, I think he said through the end of this week for the applications, and then we're going to touch base at the beginning of next week and talk about next steps. So as we talked about, we're shooting for January. It's going to be pretty intense, probably for our first couple of meetings in January, so it may make sense to wait till we've adopted the budget. Just as I've been thinking about onboarding a couple of student representatives, it's fairly chaotic in those January meetings, or can be, depending on where our budget numbers come in. So I know we had talked about January. I'm thinking it may make more sense once those, so kind of like the late January meeting. We have 3 January meetings scheduled right now.
Well, isn't one of them the day that you plan for the...
I think we have 3 plus that.
Yeah.
We have 4. I'm not counting that one. I'm just talking about 3 regular.
6? Oh, the 13th.
6, 13, and 27.
No, and 20.
27 is the public.
We have another one.
Yeah. 21st.
21, yeah.
And then the 27th is the one that we're probably not going to do. I've already taken it off my calendar and put it.
No, 27
Is the
forum,
Right,
yeah.
I mean, it was...
Yeah, not a board meeting, yeah.
It's on the calendar, so it's a board meeting, but I changed it on mine.
Yep.
Okay.
Wait, did you say the 21st?
Yep.
21st.
Yep.
Because the 20th is Martin Luther King.
We don't have school on the 21st, right?
Nope.
I think we switched the meeting.
We moved it a day. I don't think so.
21st, I have down.
I have the 21st.
What does board tax say? Your board tax says 6th, 13th, and 21st.
Right.
Yeah, it's 21st. Yep. And these are if needed, so we may...
You're such an optimist.
But we may...
It may just all be perfect.
Depending on the complexity of the budget, the 13th may be sufficient, but in my experience, if we don't have it in there, it gets harder to schedule it in early January when we say, oh, we're going to need another meeting.
Easier to cancel than to add, for sure.
21st, right at the end of our time to warn it.
That's within our frame. We could go through that week.
Okay.
Sharon likes to get that moving, gets the annual report going.
I just have one question. Are teachers or anybody else giving Bill input on students that they may identify in their...
He was talking to a couple teachers about,
Because I would not want him to be the only one selecting. I would want that to come from teachers and guidance counselors. Parents.
Yeah.
Somebody who sees something in a student that would be...
And if you know a student as well, I mean, if you know a student who you think would be a great fit.
So it's open to other people to
Yeah, let them know to
Okay.
apply, yeah.
Should I, but let Bill know? Or-
Yeah, and let the but
Yeah,
I would encourage the student directly.
okay.
too, Yeah.
It's not that much different than all of us who elect either ourselves, somebody convinces you to run for the school board. There's lots of different inputs that come into how each of us as representatives get here. So it is true we get voted by the public, but at some point, there's many different ways that we get there. So I think it's reasonable to have different ways. You want, sometimes convincing somebody who may be very good would be a very important component.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
All right. Oh, yeah.
All right. So we have these education reserve funds. We have a proposal to put them into action, and I'll let you and Brittany take it from there.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to invite Brittany and Bruce up.
Okay, do you want me to actually get up?
Why don't you guys, we have two seats right over here.
Well, usually I
We're
can
gonna-
speak from here.
Actually, we've got two seats right over here.
This
You can come
seems
sit.
easier to get up, I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah.
here I
You want me to actually?
So,
go. You're asking a lot.
so the rationale, I'll just kind of start here. We've had a flat maintenance line for quite a long time, and we've been talking for a few years now about deferred maintenance, and it's getting to the point where we really need to start investing what we have, what we can afford to invest, to take care of some critical items in all of our schools. So Bruce and Brittany will talk about the work that we did to come up with these proposed projects and where we think it makes the most sense to take this money from.
Yeah, so we have had, 5-year, 3-year and 5-year capital projects, proposed projects, and there's also a normal sort of cycle of replacement that maybe in years past we've been on and then kind of fell off as budgets got tighter. So as Peter said, the facilities budget has basically been flat for the past at least 3 years, and it basically just provides the day-to-day just to keep the district up and running. We have talked about a bond at some point in the future, but with that uncertainty and not knowing what that will entail, there's some projects that we think sort of fall below the threshold of what we might want to wrap into a bond, but are certainly above what we can provide in the normal course of the operating budget. And of course, there are other things that we could have chosen, but we really tried to look and evaluate what would make the most sense with the money that we have, sort of the best, I really hate this term, but it works, the best bang for your buck, and also projects that we could reasonably do over the course of the next year, that wouldn't be so large in scale that we wouldn't be able to finish over the summer or over Christmas breaks and be like super disruptive to the students in the classroom. So I'm going to let Bruce talk about the projects that we ultimately decided to propose, and then I can talk more about the reserve funds.
Just a quick question before we start. What is our line item that we have in the budget for maintenance?
We carry about 1.5 million for facilities, but that's inclusive of all utilities,
Oh, it is.
fuel, natural gas, propane, electricity, communications, which are our phone systems.
Yeah. I just thought I remembered, and maybe that we had a single line item that was for, sort of, well, maybe it was our contingency that I'm thinking of.
We have a contingency,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Bruce, do you want to talk first just to remind everyone of your kind of role and...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I'm Bruce McIntyre. I am your Director of Facilities. For the past couple of years, I've been the Director for the district, and certainly am familiar with all of our buildings. I've been in every building through the spaces nobody travels into, and back. And I work closely with Eric Warren, who prior to our district becoming one, was in charge of all facilities for the elementary schools. And now we work together, I think we worked pretty well together. So Eric had some input in this, and Brittany and I sat and discussed it. And so before you, we have some projects, like we said, we felt were too big to tackle in our operating budget, but not necessarily so big they needed to be in a bond. And there are far more than what we have picked out here, but we picked some of the ones we thought were most dire. So, and I went in alphabetical order. So starting with the report, and these pictures may be a little difficult to see on the wall, but this is a picture of a broken up floor tile. Now this is in a little maintenance area just inside, but we have similar conditions next to the stage. There's a few areas in the building where this tile is in rough shape, and it's asbestos tile, so that's why it really hasn't been dealt with, because we need to have a contractor come in and remove it properly and then put something back down. And then, like Cornwall has the same issues. This is bordering there. Well, this is in the main hallway. Here, this borders into their gymnasium or multi-purpose room. And every year they get a little worse. People walking over them, breaks off a little more. It's something we really need to deal with. Mary Hogan School has an old section of membrane roof that's near in the low brick area, one of those windows on the top left. And there's a couple of pictures of the membrane itself. It's been patched a bunch of times. It's still leaking, leaks right into the building. Something we need to take care of. Going around the building, I probably have 50 photos, I only picked a couple. But the soffits, so that's just below the edge of the roof. The wood is all deteriorated and rotting. So really need to be replaced. We got to use a PVC material to do it correctly. The windows in Mary Hogan, the ANC wings are the oldest wings in the building. I don't know if you can tell, it's rusted right through that window casing. Looks right out into the backyard there. So we have that. That's probably the biggest ticket item in our list of things to do on what we're proposing. High school, similar soffit issues. This is at the entrance of the building, and again, it's difficult to see, but right above that light, there's like a 4-inch hole that looks right up into underneath the roof.
Lots of critters living in there.
And then we also have some insulation issues in the wings of the high school. And if you can tell, that's a thermal image on the right. The red is actually, the red and orange are heat escaping from the building. And then if you look back over, that's taken from the same viewpoint. So you can see the really red over there is the end of the brick wall, and then the wall going up. The middle school, the dividing wall at the middle school is difficult to operate. Had a professional come in and service it, and he said that the track's actually worn out in a couple of spots. And then it's also a safety concern. We actually applied for state funding for a grant, the school safety grant, which we were denied. But we wanted to replace this and put in a dividing wall that has an access door in it. Because if you look on the picture on the right, you can see the windows. They look out behind the middle school, and it's beautiful. It's nice to sit in the cafeteria and be able to see the kids playing out there. However, if there were a threat that came to the building from that side, there's nowhere to go. You're just sitting in a cafeteria with a bunch of windows. And so the thought was, if we had an access door in the middle of that, kids could easily go into the gymnasium, which is secure and has no windows. Ripton School is in dire need of some insulation. I did do scans all the way around the building. The entire building is very leaky. But this particular corner, where that classroom is, we have chronic issues of just not being able to keep it up to temp in cold weather. the students are sitting in there in their jackets. So we picked, we didn't feel that we could insulate the entire building and keep it within our, scope of work. But to insulate this end of the building would dramatically help that classroom. Salisbury School, we have, school's in pretty good shape. We have pumps that circulate hot water, both domestic and heat, that are original. They're about the end of their service life. They have required more repair recently. So we'd like to put those on the list as just to replace them now before it becomes an emergency. And then here at Shoreham, we have 3 different methods of controlling the heat and ventilation in this building, which don't talk to each other, which makes for some uncomfortable days here. I'm sure Michael can speak to that. Sometimes the heat won't shut off and you get a little too warm, and there are other days when you can't get the heat to come on and you're freezing. So we would like to replace that all with one system that would provide a lot more comfort and also a lot more efficiency, because what we have now is very inefficient. And then again, floor tile. The kitchen flooring here is in rough shape. The glue underneath it's asbestos. It has to be abated. We should put in ceramic tile, which is what's meant to be in the kitchen. And we've been written up several times from the health inspector on the condition of the floor, which is, it's difficult for our food service workers to do much about that. And they don't look good when they come back with a low score on their, from the health inspector. And that, let's see, we got all Waybridge. So Waybridge, we have a section of sidewalk that's completely missing, and then the fire lane's in pretty rough shape. So on the list of projects, we'd like to fix that, just to eliminate the trip hazards that we have at the front.
Does anybody, sorry, I was just going to say, does anybody have questions about the projects, and then we can talk about the financial aspect of it?
Would this be all summertime work?
I would say that, yes, all summertime work. It'd be difficult to, we might be able to do some of the flooring stuff during a spring break, if I can time it right. Because the abatement contractors are usually extremely busy in the summer, so if I can catch them before summer break, that usually helps us financially and schedule-wise.
Mary?
Regarding the soffits at Mary Hogan and high school, is there any need in the future for new roofing for either of those buildings, or?
Not in the time, but that would be out of the scope of what we're looking at, so that would be a bond type of thing.
I just wondered if we're going to put a new roof on in 5 years or something.
Yeah, these won't last 5 years.
They won't, okay.
No, they're already failing.
They're already.
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of buildings now are doing larger overhangs.
Yes.
So they don't drip on the soffit so much, and there's not so much rotting. But if that's too far in the future, then.
Yeah, it's just too far out.
Okay.
It'll be a much bigger problem if we wait another year.
Okay.
Betty?
There was an email we received about some water fountains or taps at Mary Hogan. Is that a different budget, or?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So,
I didn't get the question.
So she was, Betty was referencing an email that went home to parents at Mary Hogan regarding lead testing that we did. Specifically at Mary Hogan, we've gotten the results back. So if you remember, I don't know, maybe it was a few months ago, we came to the board because we had actually partnered with Middlebury College some months ago to do some preemptive testing, lead testing at all our schools. And as a result of that lead testing, we remediated any water fountains and bottle filling stations that tested higher than 4 parts per billion, which is the amount that was set by the legislature. And then we did some retesting. We ordered a lot of signage as well because we really want to direct people to those sources, just so that we can more frequently test and monitor them. So this did leave some sinks in other areas like bathrooms and classrooms, which have the signage, but we're still testing higher than the 4 parts per billion. And as part of the new state law, we had to do retesting. So 3 of the taps tested, 3 classroom taps tested high at Mary Hogan, higher than the 4 parts per billion. So those will be replaced during December break, and we will get some reimbursement through the state from that. And that's frankly much less expensive.
Yeah.
About how much per tap?
It's about $500 a tap.
Right.
To replace them.
So we have 3 taps that we're going to replace, even though we're advising people not to drink from them, but to drink from the water filling stations, but they will be remediated.
Jen?
The asbestos tiles crumbling in Bridport are really concerning to me. I get the long term you're going to repair them, but in the short term, is there dust that the children are being exposed to, and is there a short-term solution that is in place right now?
So we have removed everything that's really loose, and then we wax over to encapsulate it is the proper method. And so we have done that. But if it gets hard use, pieces do come up. So it's not ground to the point where it's airborne, thankfully. If that were the case, we would have to immediately close the area and have to abate it. We haven't hit that point, but the longer we wait, the more likely that would happen. Yes.
What were some of the other projects you looked at Weybridge? I always feel like paving's kind of, so there's something else that would be more, that students would benefit from more?
Well, we looked at that because it was a trip hazard more than just pavement. But
we looked at the roof,
we looked at the roof,
that's
but
a pretty large scale project.
Yeah.
Right. And really the building's not in bad shape.
Yeah.
The building controls are old, but they all function.
Yeah.
We could certainly do some energy efficiency things there. I think there is still one classroom that could be abated, but the tile is underneath existing carpet that isn't failing at this point. So there's not a lot that's going to really affect the students.
Okay. I trust you.
So in our packet, we've got the full list of each of the projects and the cost, right?
Yep, and so many of these projects will require us to go through a formal bid process, and when that happens, you'll see that.
What's the bid limit?
15,000.
So anything over 15 requires a bid?
Yeah, and some of it, yes, it does. And some things that are under 15 will still go out to bid, but it won't be as formalized a process. And there may be cases where, for example, there are several schools that need asbestos abatement. We might bundle those in, and then it would meet the bid threshold. And in terms of the financial aspect of it, I did provide a list of our reserve funds. So I think that we have about $850,959 in ed reserve, $200,000 in our healthcare reserve, and then like
295, 175.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't have that number quite memorized.
I was like, she'll maybe get it. But
I was thinking, I didn't want to guess. So that we have, over $200,000, almost $300,000 in our capital reserve. So our proposal is that we would use the rest of our capital reserve to fund these projects, and then a portion of our ed reserve. And if we do that, it'll still leave us about $814,000 in combined reserves. Yes.
Jen?
When we created this ed reserve years ago, we were told there was some guideline for how much we should be putting in, and I don't believe we've added to it since that time. Can you speak to how much we should have in there and should continue to contribute?
Sure. So we have not added to the ed reserve. We have used most of our reserve funds toward our capital projects fund. There aren't really school standards for this, but there are standards for the private sector. If I recall the research about that, it was anywhere from 3 to 10%. I think 3 to 5% is comfortable.
Of an operating budget?
Correct. But those are for private businesses. In Vermont, in schools, it's all over the map. Some larger districts have millions of dollars, but some districts have no reserves. So I'm pretty comfortable with our reserves where they are, especially knowing that we'll have an opportunity to transfer our fund balance that from the year that we just finished. We'll have to have a conversation next time during our budget meeting about what to do with that. So we will be able to replenish that if necessary or do other things with that. So I'm comfortable with this number.
It's defined to me how we ended up putting them into education or capital, I guess.
Yep.
This all looks capital to me, so I don't know how.
It is capital. So when the Ed Reserve was created, it was really not created, it wasn't very specific in its purpose. So it can be used for really anything that the board deems necessary. It is all capital, but we don't have enough in capital funds to cover it. But the way that the fund was set up, Peter can probably talk more about that, or maybe you can't, I don't know, Peter Burrows.
This one? Yeah, I can. I thought this one can too if you want. Yeah, I mean, we decided to put most of our funds in Ed Reserve because they don't time out.
Right.
So we can keep funds within an Ed Reserve and not have to spend them within 3 years. So if there's something 4 or 5 years away, you're not under the gun to try to turn it over really quickly. If we put it into a capital reserve, the clock is ticking. And so just in thinking, and this is a conversation we'll have next week when we talk about the budget and the fund balances, thinking about kind of long-term, short-term, what makes the most sense.
So why, if it's not a problem, why put anything into capital reserve?
Sounds like we probably never will again.
I think the reason to do that is you're kind of making a commitment to, we've got some big projects coming, let's put them in capital reserve, and then you're communicating that to the public. So it's a different, I think it's kind of just optically a little bit different than putting it into an Ed
Yeah, it
reserve.
could also be used to save for a specific project. And then there are certain things in reporting to the state without getting into it. There's certain things in reporting that can help you, I guess, in terms of the stat book, this big collection.
So when it comes time, you'll explain that to us so that we know if there's a rationale.
Yeah, if you have a big project that you're saving for, like a specific project, it can make sense to put it in capital. If you don't.
That's what I thought. It just gets, now when we're going to take something to zero and then take half of it out of the education reserve and use it for exactly the same things, it gets a little, I guess that's just.
Why have two funds for the same purpose?
Right.
It's almost down to- it comes
I
down
mean,
to
the Ed
semantics.
Reserve is it's more helpful because it doesn't have the time limit.
Well, that's fine.
And it can be used for
Anything.
almost anything.
But you wouldn't, there are certain things you wouldn't put in a capital reserve that you might put in that reserve.
Right.
Well, my understanding of an ed reserve is that we're using it in case we have a budget shortfall in a given year that we don't anticipate unexpected expenses, and it's like an extra savings account that, not in your normal checking account, right, that you're keeping for that rainy day.
Yeah, I mean,
get that we
that's
can't
definitely
educate our students if there's asbestos in the floor that they're walking on, like, we have to take care of the facility to learn, so it makes sense, but I just feel like being careful about keeping that money for a rainy day is also important.
Sure, yeah.
There's a lot of up and down with our fund balance. And so one of the challenges of using a reserve to either buy down your tax rate or bring down your equalized pupil cost is that you create this cliff the following year.
Oh, yeah, no, I don't want to do that.
And you're basing it on kind of one-time monies. So yeah, it's just something that we'll have to be thinking about with this budget. We don't have our equalized pupil number yet. That's coming hopefully on Monday or Sunday. It's supposed to come statutorily on Sunday. I don't think we're going to see it Sunday.
How does it
but
arrive?
Maybe
Comes
Monday.
in your computer?
I'll get an email, yeah.
You get an email?
There's probably somebody working on for the state on a Sunday, I imagine.
Yeah.
There's one person. Has to do it for everybody.
His name is Brad James.
We work for the state, right? Kind of?
They're not
Sort
good.
of.
worked on this Sunday.
The other thing I wanted to point out in the reserve fund memo is we still have 200 in our healthcare reserve.
Right.
So it's something that, at some point, I think we'll probably want to do something with that. We put that in there as a safeguard when we began the HRA and HSA and didn't know what our use of the HRA would be. We've never had to use it. So it may make sense to put that, just to not have a healthcare reserve sitting there that really doesn't have a purpose right now, to move that into ed reserve.
Is that something that's within the board's power? Does that require a vote?
I believe it's in the board's power.
It's in the board's power.
So we can just...
Once things are in the reserve fund, the board has the power to use them.
Okay.
It's the transfers from our fund balance to reserve that require board approval.
Right.
I mean, this is a reserve that I don't believe there's any statutory guidelines because we created this.
And named it.
We named it, yeah.
All right. So let's put that on a future agenda.
It's something for the finance committee to discuss.
But, and the future of our health, hopefully, other than the increases every year and whatever changes in contracts are negotiated by the state whenever it comes up to do that every time after this present impasse that we're waiting on, will be a little more secure in what these unknowns were. I don't mean by rate increases as much as by, like you say, the
usage,
we're paying it out of our own funds.
Well, and the only
we'll get to a constant. However constant that is with healthcare increases.
Right. No.
But we now have whatever, a year or two of experience with HRA.
Right.
The only change from the statewide bargaining would only make it even more secure that we wouldn't be.
That's what I mean.
So that seems to me it's served its purpose.
Yeah.
That's another thing, by the way, that's coming in mid-December.
Yes, December 15th.
It's the same day.
Same day, big day.
Yeah. Maybe 2 people will be working on Sunday.
Okay, so are there further questions or discussion on this? How about a motion to approve the use of up to $295,175 from the Capital Reserve Fund and up to $236,875 from the Education Reserve Fund for deferred maintenance as spelled out in this memo across the district? Right.
Should that also have added as presented by Bruce? Otherwise, this could be for any deferred maintenance.
Well, I said as contained in the memo, but sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any further questions? If not, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, well, it'd be nice to take care of that stuff. Bruce, I just hope that we don't hear the same story of can't find anybody to do it and the bids all came in higher than what we expected due to demand on.
It's always a potential problem.
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Have you, I assume, adjusted your expectations as the economy has sort of forced those changes upon us?
Yeah, we haven't done a lot of work in the last 2 years, so I think it is a little bit of a gamble. I'm basing these estimates on some old project numbers. I did, account for price increases, hopefully enough.
Yeah.
And if we fall short on some things, we can still prioritize, health and safety above everything else.
Right.
Do what we can.
Great. Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we'll have a little discussion on the education tax rate letter. That is a confusing letter.
Should I stay here?
What's that?
Should I stay here?
Sure. Yes. You are not released.
I wouldn't want to walk back all the way back over there.
So I would welcome either of you to correct me as I say this, but this is the letter that sort of predicts what might happen if the predicted increases all come to fruition in terms of tax rates and the yield and all of that. Would either of you like to take what I just said and go into a lot more detail?
I thought you should maybe just pick one board member to do the presentation.
I could read it.
So I'll start and then
Okay.
you can join in. Do you want a copy of it? Okay.
I've memorized it.
Okay. Of course.
Word for
So, we look forward to this every year to get a sense of where the state is starting. The state does a preliminary analysis to look at, okay, what do we think is going to happen with ed spending this year? The state has to determine what everybody's spending because the state has to raise all of the money. That includes looking at all of the bonds and all of the other things that are in play for districts across the state. So when you read that the prediction is a kind of a rough one for next year, is that the increase is the most it's been in 10 years, is that what it said?
Yeah.
That means it's just going to put more pressure on the tax rate for the state to generate that. And as we know, some of that we have control over slightly in terms of what we decide to put forward to voters in March. But a large part of that we don't have any control over, and that yield rate is essentially how the state does a statewide tax, essentially. So even if we keep our funding level, that doesn't mean our taxes are level, because the state has to generate more revenue. So that's going to come, it comes from everybody, and that's adjusted by that yield rate. So essentially, that's kind of why we wait for this and why it's important, is we want to see where the state is starting. In my experience, this is, I believe, year 3 or year 4 of the yield rate. It used to be $1 or a portion of $1, the previous calculation. In my experience every year, and Peter has experience with this in the legislature, this changes throughout the session. So you end the session always with a yield rate that's different than where you start out in December. So this is really kind of just the beginning. So we don't need to be wedded to this yield rate. But it does give us a sense of where things are headed, and that will probably, I mean, I think it's what it's essentially saying is the impact on our tax rate will be more significant than in previous years. That's kind of what I take away from this. Brittany?
Yeah, one of the things that they talk about, that is talked about in this letter, is that they're projecting a $72 million increase statewide, and $28 million of that as a result of premium increases for healthcare. So that's substantial. It also talks about that they're projecting about a 5.5% increase in ed spending per blind people statewide, which is much higher than what has been projected in previous years. So I think what you're seeing is a result of years of restrained spending, and now the top's kind of coming off, on top of these fixed costs like healthcare that are rising, far beyond our control and far beyond what we just can't keep up. So I think there's been a number of years of really sort of restrained budgeting. On top of that, you have years since the moratorium on school construction aid. So now people just can't, school districts have gotten to the point where you have to go out for a bond. So you're seeing a lot of these really big ticket bonds in some of the districts, 50 million, 75 million in some of the larger districts across the state. And so part of the budget's reflective of that. So it's not altogether surprising, but it is certainly much larger than what we've seen in previous years. And this just lets us know that the pains that we're feeling are being felt across the state.
Yeah. The other thing I just add is that some of that restrained spending, and we were part of that as well, is that as more and more districts unify, the individual districts are spending their reserves rather than take them into the larger union. And that's helped them keep their spending increases lower, but that's a one-time savings.
But that ends pretty soon, because most everybody
That's right, but that's right.
have been unified.
Yeah, but like the 2 years ago when the governor said, oh, it's going to be Armageddon, and then the boards came in at like a 0.5% increase, or school districts came in at a 0.5% increase, a lot of that was attributable to everybody sort of spending away their reserves as they came to unify together.
Yep. So more to come.
Yeah.
Right, so I'm not missing that there's not an actual rate in here, right?
Well, they proposed a property yield.
Where's that? Oh, I didn't get past that first 2 pages. I thought it was the end of it.
Keep going.
Yeah. So it's, the
We don't
property
have
yield is
heart
up
rate,
from last year, which normally
a
we
good
think,
thing.
yay. But since spending is proposed to be going up so much, that's probably going to outpace the increase in the yield. Usually an increase in the yield, all else equal, leads to a decrease in the tax rate, but only when it's not outpaced, that by spending.
So wait, what numbers am I supposed to be looking at?
The average rate.
The average rate?
Yeah. Okay, just above that, there's the homestead yields.
Yeah.
So that homestead property, 10,648 versus 10,883.
Yeah.
That's a mechanism in our funding formula.
That's what I thought, okay.
Yeah. And then, below that, down below, under ed spending growth, they start to predict equalized pupil decline across the state, education spending increase. Oh dear God.
So whose job is it, or like what's the plan to help folks like myself who don't have advanced degrees in reading this stuff, to understand at again, my level, what this means? Like, this is a fundamental building block for us to figure out where we should be allocating resources and time and all the challenges that we're talking about. And I bet underneath here, there's a lot of good information to help folks understand where we're at. I mean, anytime you read a paragraph and it says that somebody hasn't seen something like this in 10 years, I perk up. So how do we help folks digest this? Because this is not something that anybody who's cursory involved at this level would have a chance in heck of understanding. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen.
And the only way that the public, if they can understand it, has a role in it is to vote the budget down.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just such an informative piece of information for us to get our heads around and understand what we're really dealing with. But I don't know the process to help put it in language that...
I think it's really, in a way, it's to look at it in its most simplistic form. This is really meant to say, hey, if you don't control yourself, this is what's going to happen. It's basically to say, this will happen unless all of you school districts can keep your spending increases to, as low as possible.
But I don't even think people understand, when you say this is what's going to happen, I don't think people understand what the this is.
Well, if you ignore the yield part of it, which is very confusing to everybody, and go to the average rates part, I think people do understand what a homestead property tax rate is. The income rate is much harder to understand, yet 2/3 of us pay our property taxes based on income, so it's actually important to understand. And then the non-homestead property is actually the easiest to understand, and none of us are in that category.
Right.
We'll present, when we present the budget, we'll present like an overview of what we think. When we get to tax rate, we'll show, here's what the impact is for someone with a home for $200,000, and we'll also have one for income sensitivity to show what the impact is for that as well. So we will provide that. But I mean, what you're raising is what I've been hearing for many, many years, and the legislature has taken it up in terms of simplifying the funding formula itself, because it is so obfuscating that it's very, very challenging, even for people within the system, to understand the mechanism. So I think, my feeling is, and VSBA has a lot of resources too, which I feel like over the years we've kind of shown some of those kind of intro into the system, but I think this document is more kind of for people in the field. I don't think this is meant for regular public consumption.
But at the heart of it, we know its message.
Yeah.
Right, like whether it's intended for
Yeah,
finance
yeah.
folks or whomever, we know its message is important. And so we also know that there needs to be a way that we provide folks with some foundational information so that they can understand why we're having the debates that we're having. And how we help to get that message out, I think, is important.
Yeah.
As, like, us as a school district.
Us as a school district,
Like,
right?
we can put this into layman's terms somehow to share, like, this is a
Like, here's,
serious
here's
situation.
what we're talking about, folks, and it's like, you go back to, how a bill becomes a law, right? Like,
Yeah.
That would be good.
That worked great for me back then.
Or conjunction junction,
A
that's
little
good.
junction goes a long way.
Yeah, this doesn't quite lend itself to
You know, the other part too is that in costs of education per se, in the whole thing with unifications of districts saying it's going to reduce costs, that's not the case. It doesn't reduce costs. It hopefully reduces the increase per year in the cost, because there's so many things like the healthcare and everything else, which are markedly bigger drivers, than shutting down one building if you were closing the school, or changing the format of how you deal with the mix of students in different places. The students are still there, the personnel in most cases still, there may be some efficiencies, but if it reduces costs, great, but I'm not sure that that's really, you're going to see that. Suddenly you're going to say, it cost me $2,000 less to heat my house this year. I don't think that's going to be as real as you'd like to see it. Would be great if it is, but I think that's a fallacy. But hopefully you don't see this flat, but we'll see.
I think the other message in this letter, and I think Peter's right, it is sort of, it's a little bit of an inside baseball letter, but is also to say, remember, we're all in this together, so that if you aren't responsible with your spending, it affects everybody statewide, the way because it's a statewide funding formula. So, just talking with somebody today, that's why if South Burlington is successful with their $200 million bond, all of our taxes go up 2 cents statewide, because it's a statewide funding system. So if we all this is a way to say, please, all school districts, you all need to be in this together in order to, keep the measurements in check.
Do you think most people know that?
No. No, it's a very confusing system in that, it is a statewide system. Money is raised by the state and then redistributed by the state, but the state doesn't actually control it. It's decided locally. And then what makes it even more confusing to folks is that the money is collected locally. So they feel like they're paying these taxes to their town or their school district, but they're not. The towns are really just acting as the agents. They just take the money they collect and send it to the state. But ultimately, the state looks at all the approved budgets, says we need to raise $1.6 billion. We're getting this much from the sales tax, this much from the rooms and meals tax, and then this much gets then split among homestead, non-homestead, and income to fill in the rest. And then it just gets all sent back out again to fund everything. So it's a weird, it's a state-funded system, but the state has no control over the spending other than to say, hey, watch out. Because they just raise the money and send it back out again.
Other than excuse me.
Yeah. It's over here.
I know. State your reason for,
at the end, you have to say, I yield back my time.
I yield back my time. Did I have it? Yeah. Is there per that whole argument, is there a benefit or a negative to a district which really fights, so to speak, to keep their
Serious repeating everything you said.
serious repeating? Is there a benefit for the wealthy or the district that's supporting education versus the district that isn't. Meaning that if it is a statewide system, the district that fights to be smaller could be even a greater loser, so to speak.
Yes, well, I think,
I mean, that's my point.
yes, so in reality, lower spending per pupil districts, their contribution goes to fund, still funds everybody, so they are in fact subsidizing to an extent higher spending districts.
But that's part of, what Mary was saying, just in your South Burlington reference type of thing of 2%. Do people understand that? Well, no.
Well, that was actually kind of new information for me too. That I just learned today.
And the other thing that's hard in this conversation, and I don't want us to equate more spending with a better educational experience. Those things are not directly one-on-one correlated. No. And so we have to also be thoughtful in this debate that just because I'm spending the most doesn't mean that I care more or I'm providing more or I'm having a better experience.
Now, there are districts in the state that spend significantly less than your high spenders with better results for whatever reason.
So it does, it just, all of that muddies the water, and so I just think it's important that in any of these debates, at least we have some common set of understanding before we...
Yeah, and it's hard to have a common set of understanding when it is such a complex system. Turns out most states have complex systems. Yeah, there's no one great...
The thing that's easier, I think, about some states is that, we have the states controlling to a certain degree or raising the funds statewide, and then locally, we're really deciding locally, but we're really deciding statewide, because if we just decided locally, we would pay for what we asked for. Whereas, like you said, we're deciding to spend X amount per pupil, and we may be sending some of the funding we raise elsewhere beyond funding our own students, right?
It's almost like we're deciding what we're going to put into the pot.
Well, it's more we're deciding what we're going to get out of the pot.
How we get what we're going to get, I don't think there's a clear understanding. If I say I'm going to spend, if we make a decision to vote, and we're going to spend $10 on every kid, and we have X number of kids, and you said to folks, explain to me now how you're going to get, let's say you had 10 kids, how you're going to get your $100?
Yep.
I'm taking the under.
Yeah.
I'm not being able to explain how that happens. I'm totally taking the under.
Well, what I was going to say is the difference in most states is the state will tell you, based on the number of equalized pupils or enrollment count or whatever it is, this is how much funding you have for your school district. So it's at least that's clear. I mean, in terms of how they raise the funds and, a percentage of income and property and et cetera, but in general, it's pretty clear, like, this is the pot of money you have. Now, figure out what you're going to do with it, or figure out how you're going to raise more through bonding or whatever it is. Our system is just very, very complicated, and it gives the perception of raising locally for school funding when it's actually not. That's not how it works. So in some ways, I just feel like it's not transparent enough in terms of its design, which is Act 60 and 68.
But there's also the part that the statewide component sort of started back years ago with the Brigham case relative to equalizing, ability to raise money for education, which other states don't have, correct? Not every state has that kind of a, whether it works or not, but they don't come from a point of view of saying, this district can raise it different than a district in the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, maybe you can, I don't know how to explain it, but you did start with that.
Oh, yes.
Start with the intention to be able to provide an equitable education
Absolutely.
to all students in the state.
And that was a lawsuit brought by somebody.
Well, it basically made the change from property became the asset of the state for tax purposes, not of the town or the school district. I mean, you still have people who are continually saying, well, look at all this money we send to Montpelier because of all of our second homes. Well, it's like, you have to sort of change your perception. Those aren't your assets anymore. They are the state's asset for tax purposes. It would be like saying, well, really look at how little Shelburne gets back despite how much they contribute in income taxes because they got the doctors and lawyers. It's not. It's
And the businessman.
That's right.
The problem, I think, with the current setup, and I think where we don't get there in terms of equity, is the fact that we have our lower socioeconomic towns across the state deciding to spend less.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they're paying more for other people, so they're making up the difference. They're spending $14,000, $15,000 per pupil.
But they're saying they're spending, yeah.
So in a lot of ways, it exacerbates inequity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to keep their taxes low.
They want to keep their tax rate low.
Our community can't handle any
So
more
other
than that.
people are spending more, and then the gap widens.
Is your committee going to fix this, Peter?
Well, I think it'd be important to remember that any fix tackling that fairness issue is one that would affect our district negatively.
Right.
Because we are a high-spending district.
High-spending district.
But is in all seriousness, is there a pop-up meeting that is looking into?
Well, there are legislators from areas that, spend $14,000 a year per pupil who recognize this and are trying to figure out a formula that would work. And one of the ideas is to say, okay, it's a bit of a return to the old days, but to say, what is adequate funding per pupil? So you would go to that. Adequate funding is $16,000 a student. That's what you get, and then you figure out a new sort of formula where the state collects the money, but it's that anything you spend above that is tied a little bit more to the taxpayers in that community.
So rather than like the penalty that's now, the voters in an individual district would vote to exceed the $16,000.
That's right. That's right. And it would be more, that additional money would be tied more directly. I mean, these are all ideas of, some people say, hey, let's just put it all on income tax and be done with it.
Right.
Not a good idea.
Anyway. Well, we will close on that topic for now. As we come to the end of the agenda, at our agenda meeting, Lorraine and Suzanne and I and Peter talked about some potential changes in our agenda that we wanted to bounce off, how the agenda is formed and how it works. We've batted around the idea and just haven't ever committed to it of doing a consent agenda, which puts a little more responsibility on us in terms of making sure we've read our information before we come. But the idea would be to approve the, quote, consent agenda, which would be approving standard every week things, the minutes, the bills, and anything else that's sort of, what else might be in there, the superintendent's report. What's that?
Information.
Yeah, any information that's included. And so rather than put the finance committee members through reading the bills out loud, they would be provided to us in a written form. The minutes would be provided as they are anyway, and we would just sort of approve a consent agenda. I think we should try it. If, for example, there's a glaring error in the minutes that somebody wants to correct, at any time you can pull anything out of the consent agenda to correct it, whatever it happens to be, and that's fine. Or if it doesn't make the consent agenda on time, it'll just be added in there. But it would get us through sort of those preliminary things a little quicker. It's just important that we all read them first. Anyway.
I just want to make a point. I think our board meetings are reasonably concise.
I know you want to get back to the old days, don't you?
No. But I mean, our board, it's amazing. I mean, well, you were there. You know what it's like, what it was like. I mean, we could call it micromanage. It was just we had a lot more responsibility detail-wise than this board now does. So I think we need to be, I mean, we're having this discussion here, which is sort of not directly related to this letter, but it is related to our inadequacies and trying to figure out what all this means and how we talk to people about it as a member, as a community person, or even understand it as a taxpayer. So, I mean, those things are important, but I don't, there's a part of me that I don't want to see us sort of lose some of that.
Right.
Sort of spontaneity, if that's the word. Now, I'm not reading the bills, that's fine, okay, I don't know that. But if you see my point, I think that...
I do, yes.
I think if we categorize it and say, we're here for business, we consent agenda, adjourn. I mean, you know, I just want
We will be sure to load up the agenda with more in-depth topics. Jen?
Is there room for discussion? So like for the consent agenda, you say, could somebody make a motion? Do you still do that? Like
Yes.
you make a motion to approve?
The consent agenda.
And then is there any discussion, right? Is that where we would then talk about if we had a question about the minutes or didn't realize there was 4 more pages to a report that we were provided, for example?
So that's a good
Before we
question.
vote on it?
No, I think if there was a part of it you wanted to discuss, you would pull it out of the consent agenda.
So say, when you asked about the minutes, so if there was an issue with the minutes, you would say when there's asked for a vote to approve the consent agenda, you would say, Board Chair, I would request that we pull out the minutes because there's an issue with them.
Okay.
So then you vote to pull those out, and then you would vote again to approve the consent agenda minus the minutes.
Okay.
The consent agenda might also include simple contracts or bid awards as well.
Yeah, it sounds like we might lose some discussion that could be valuable.
I'm not trying to make it
No.
Yeah.
big deal on it, but
we can try it.
I'm willing to try it, but I don't want to lose a little of the spontaneity about things, especially under the context that our meetings are seldom more than an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
All right, really. I mean,
So, but we are also looking at adding some new features to the agenda as well.
Ah!
We didn't tell us what we'd be gaining.
What are we gaining?
Well, one thing would be is to sort of, is to just, at the end of each meeting, do a little bit of a recap of the issues to make sure we understand what we were discussing and sort of what the next steps are. As well as some of the other things we were looking at. One conversation that we also were talking about is, and I think we may need to have a conversation as well, is the role of the student representative. On the UD3 board, we've had student representatives, and we've sort of vacillated between, for a while, they kind of came in and gave a report of what was going on. And then sometimes they just sort of packed up and left after that. Then we sort of tried to make the role more serious and kind of said, you're not just here to give a report, and they didn't give a report, but they came and participated in the conversations. So we were discussing sort of the level of obligation to put on them to come up with something every month to present to the board as well. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. I can go back and forth myself. You know, I think both Suzanne and Lorraine's, correct if I'm wrong, take on it was like, it would be great to sort of make it a regular thing because that's the only time we're really going to ever hear from students about students. Whereas I've always sort of tended to say, well, none of us are required to give a report.
It seems like it's not.
I
We all bring perspective to these tables.
We all do. And so have them operate like we all do. And if, you know, you don't want a weekly report on, or I don't want a weekly report on my perspective, or your perspective, but I don't want a weekly report on your perspective either.
I agree with you. And also, Peter, you have a good practice of going around periodically and saying, what's your thought on this? And giving each of us a chance to actually speak. So I think they should be treated like we do. Unless there's something specific that we feel like we'd like you to follow up on this and...
Or if they have something that
right.
What I remember was the student reps on U3 had done a survey of the students and just sort of talked about what were things that they, and they sort of gave us a presentation on that survey. It was actually really great.
I'm wondering if the student won't be part of a committee unless they want to, right?
What do you decide on committees? I think,
I'm sorry.
what do we decide on committees?
That they would be assigned a committee.
Oh, they would be, oh, okay. I was just thinking as part of our committee report, the student could have an option to share concerns,
Yes.
you know, from the student perspective, if students had, you know, conveyed something as an alternative to kind of giving a report. That's sort of when we're all reporting back on things that we focus on, but maybe that's not appropriate if the student's actually on the committee.
But if they were on, say, your community liaison committee?
Right, then they
That would be a
could share the
perfect
perspective of
way
the
for them to-
students
right.
as it relates to the community engagement.
Right.
Right, if they choose to be on that committee.
Right.
Yeah, that's,
But yeah, I wouldn't want them to have an added assignment or pressure.
The other thing that we were looking at adding, and really Peter's going to see how this could best work, is that each month have some sort of recognition for a staff member or, you know, a highly involved community member, so that on a monthly basis we can recognize somebody for their work. A big cash award trophy that can happen. But you know, the sort of how the mechanics of how that would happen and how that would work. Peter's going to kind of come up with a plan, but we thought that might be.
I'd love to hear from folks about what they think in terms of what you think that might look like.
Cash awards and.
Not the cash awards,
But what a sort of monthly recognition might look like.
Right. I just would have to say on the meeting, or the visits we've had in school, I've been so impressed with some of the work that the teachers have put into their instructional plans and the detail and how much time they've put into it. I'd like to recognize them publicly for that because otherwise people just don't see that. It was very enriching for me and enlightening for me to see how much they put into it. So I think it'd be a great idea.
I was thinking too would be like recognized to employees. I mean, it could be you know, support staff and teacher. It could be maybe an administrator sometimes too.
Right.
Would it make sense to do it as we go to each of the schools?
Oh, absolutely.
So that it would be that person from that, two of those people from that school every time we go. That way their local community would be more likely to attend.
Could, except in terms of our numbers, we're in Middlebury 3 times for over half the employees. So the numbers wouldn't exactly
you wouldn't do two
work.
Got it.
But I like that idea too, for sure.
Maybe be one at each of the schools.
Yeah,
We go to it,
yeah.
to Middlebury.
Yeah,
Or something like that.
Yes,
Maybe given the number of teachers and support staff, not just educators, but also, you know, tutors or nurses and other support staff, maybe have someone from each school. Is that too big a number? Recognize someone from
No.
each. Every month have, you know, someone from
So I think that it probably gives you some time to sort of think about it, come up with something sort of thinking about balance and travel and all of that.
and significance.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah, we don't want it to be a watered down.
The word hero is used way inappropriately in everything these days. Just because you're in the military doesn't make you a hero. And that's used, I think of it all the time in that way. Some of them may be unbelievable heroes, and others, that's their job that they do every day like everybody else. So I think that I'm not using that. I'm just using it as, I don't want to see it become because we got to do it every week or whatever that is.
Like a good job label. Yeah, it's got to be something
I
really
mean,
outstanding.
it sort of gets me that every kid gets a trophy because he gets
participation.
I know that's cynical, but I mean, I'm in that place of trying to decide what that.
So what are the criteria? We need to define the criteria.
But we're gonna let the superintendent chew on that.
Figure that out.
Yes, Jory, yes, please.
Might there be a way to democratize the process and have something maybe on the website where anyone from the community can just write in a little, I noticed that so-and-so and beyond, maybe we pull from that database of input that we could, submit, but also staff could submit, administrators could submit, community members could submit.
I'm going to leave that. I feel that we as a board don't have the capacity to sort of make all this happen.
Yeah.
So this is a great time.
It's our job just to say if we'd like to, if we think that's a good idea.
We don't want the
have
fun
it
part.
at our board meetings. Do we think that would be a good use of our board meetings? Is that the
Yes,
conversation?
that's the conversation.
It would be lovely for us to be able to recognize our working staff face to face.
Great. So, Chip, we will be lengthening our meeting in lieu of the...
Well, we're already over 2 hours now.
That's right, that's what I'm saying.
Yes, but it's still shorter than they were originally.
Oh, God, yes. Talk to Natalie Peters. You can remember those days.
I used to do the Weybridge board minutes, and I'd be done at midnight.
Yep.
Oh, my God.
But that wasn't, you were in the days of the 5th budget defeat.
Yes.
And then the whole construction project.
And honestly, there were a lot of things that were different. We dealt with every personnel issue.
That's
We
right.
dealt with everything, which some of those took very long, detailed, and difficult type things, which this board does not interact in the same way.
Well, because we've been fortunate and we haven't had to.
I know that, but I meant there were other things that were just more detailed as a board. So I'm not, but I don't need to read the bills.
All right, on that note, how about a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. We have adjourned, as always, thank you everybody for coming on out here. So we are just short of 2 hours.